Hey, coaches, welcome to Championship Culture. Got a special guest today. Brett Hickman is with us, and I've seen Brett speak before, so I know he's not only a tremendous X and O guy, but he is a big-time culture guy. A former college coach. He's a head football coach. He's a big-time FCA guy. He's a family man. He runs a YouTube channel. And Brett, I got to tell you, man, I'm here to steal your good ideas. So I'm excited to have you on the channel. Let's just roll into it. So question number one, can you give a 1-minute elevator introduction?
Yeah, Joe, appreciate you having me again, man. I think this is great. Anytime we can share ideas with coaches, I think that's, it's such a great profession and it's such a unique thing to be a part of. You hit on kind of the big points. I am a coach's kid. I've been around the game my entire life. My father was a long-time successful high school coach. He's actually the winningest head football coach at St. Paul's High School in West Brunswick, where I'm the head coach. I'm coaching at my alma mater after spending 9 years as a full-time college coach, 4 years at North Greenville University and 5 years at Gardner-Webb University. Various backgrounds in terms of what I've coached. I've been defensive guy, defensive coordinator, coached offense, run coordinator. Spent 3 years involved in the program at East Carolina, first as an undergraduate assistant and then as a GA. I'm an Eastern North Carolina native, so I'm kind of back home, but I don't think any of those titles or anything talks about my worth any more than, first of all, my faith in Jesus Christ certainly is what drives me in everything that I do personally and why we coach. And, hopefully it'll always be believer and then husband to my beautiful wife, Sarah. We'll be celebrating our 8th anniversary. She's also East Carolina grad. We met in school there. And then we have two beautiful little boys who, I love more every day now that I've been home with them in quarantine. But gosh almighty, I'm really impressed by what our wives do every day. We have a 5-year-old Henry and a 10-month-old named Jack.
Awesome, man. I've got two daughters that graduated from ECU, or actually one graduated and one's in ECU. So
what we call the Harvard of Pitt County, baby.
There you go. There you go. All right. So question number two, how do you define culture?
I think it's kind of a loaded question because I heard somebody say, if you go around the room and you ask all your team what your culture is and they give you a bunch of different answers, then you don't have a culture, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with because, it's a culture, leadership, offense, defense. If you can't define it, you still have it. It's just not very good. Everyone's got a culture, whether or not or everybody's got some form of leadership, whether or not it's good, whether or not it's bad, whether or not it's indifferent, or whether or not it's tremendous. Culture to me, Joe, I define it as the daily implementation. Okay. It's the daily implementation and execution of your standards. To me, it's just, I know you're a big air raid guy or, the wing T guys that are buck sweep guys. If you run old air raid 95 and the Y doesn't run the cross, you're not executing the play. When you start thinking of your culture in terms of a football play, if you are not attacking your standards every day, if you're not reinforcing positive behavior and you're not confronting anti-cultural behavior, then you have an indifferent culture. I think that's a big thing is just what do you believe in? What are your non-negotiables? And are you getting your assistant coaches and are you getting the young men and anyone who touches your players to reinforce those standards every day by their action? Culture, it starts at the top, but you have real culture when the actions that you preach about are being attacked by the young men under your charge every day and the coaches under your charge. It's easy for me to get up here and talk about it. It's another thing to be about it. And your culture is going to change a little bit year to year. Your core values and your non-negotiables remain the same, but you have to be adaptable within, certain principles every year. But, it's a loaded question. And I hope that kind of hits on what I believe it is, but, we're going to be confrontational to people who are against what we talk about and what we try to be about every day.
I believe you just nailed that one, and especially the confrontational as far as it's a it's a constant battle to install that culture. I love it, man. All right, here's a first tough one. What are the 3 best things you do to build your culture in your program?
I'm a lot like you in a sense that we really dwell on our core values, and I see your tweets all the time. I'm not as active with my team on social media. We have a running kind of private chat that talks about these things, and um, just kind of go back, give you a little background. So in 2013, the head coach who was at North Greenville University, a guy named Carroll McCray, had been offered the job at his alma mater. Well, I had been there for 4 or 5 years, and they had asked me to um, interview for the head coaching job. And I would have been 26 years old. I've probably been the youngest college head coach in the country. So, knowing how much I kind of messed up my first year as a head high school coach at 32, looking back on it, if you've ever seen a giant train wreck, that's probably how that would have turned out. But after a deep thought, deep night in prayer, I guess what you will, I was like, I just really don't have a plan. And, out of that came about a 130-page binder that talks about our plan to win. And the plan to win starts with, okay, what are you going to be about? So the first thing we talk about in our culture is our core values. And they're, everything ties into the next one. I believe, we just celebrated Memorial Day. Greater has no love than man who's willing to lay down his life for his kid. Love is the most powerful thing in the Christian faith. And I don't think men talk about it enough. That's the cornerstone of everything we believe. Whether or not it's loving each other, whether or not it's loving a family member, whether or not it's exuding Christ's love through what we do every day. And I really became a better coach. I've had 2 men, in my life who've been like fathers. Well, obviously one of them is my father, and the other one's a guy named Jimmy Fletcher, who is our current AD and I played for. And, they both kind of said, our examples of, when you start understanding how Jesus loved you, then you become a better coach. And I think you become a better coach when you become a father and you start recognizing those things. So we start everything with love, and then this game kind of transitions to passion. I think you have to be extraordinarily passionate about what you do. I think infectious energy. I think your team takes on your personality. Whether or not it's your X's and O's beliefs or really how they act sometimes on the sidelines, or, just the excitability. So we talk about love, passion, discipline, whether or not it's the discipline in the weight room, the discipline on the field, the discipline in the classroom. I truly believe the disciplined man is the freed man, because eventually that's the guy who becomes the guy who has choices in life because he made good decisions. And, I think disciplined football teams, I don't care what you do offensively, defensively, or in the kicking game scheme wise, disciplined football teams who are able to hone, what they've repeated in practice and being able to execute on Friday nights and not making mistakes is going to be the team that wins. They're also going to be the people who graduate high in their class. They're going to be the best employers. They're going to be the best employees. You show me somebody who's successful, I'll show you somebody who's got some discipline in their life. And then the last 2, kind of tie off of all those 3 is toughness. That's physical toughness, that's mental toughness, and that's, and then the secret sauce to all of that is togetherness. I think togetherness is a byproduct of common investment with your kids. I think when they go through all of these things together, we talk about falling in love with the process. The process is the weight room. The process is, they took a picture. We had graduation yesterday, and there's 5 kids who I loved, and one of them's going on to play college football. The other 4 were just doggone good high school ball players, and I loved them. And I just got thinking, gosh, over the last 2 years, I've put a foot up their rear end. And at times, some of those guys did not like me. A lot of them didn't really like me the first year, but they really, you look at their bodies now, they bought into the process. They bought into the weight room, and my gosh, I'm going to miss all of them on that field on Friday night. they became such better players because they bought into everything that was involved in our program, from how they practiced to how they competed. And they're taking the picture together in their cap and gown, and their caps are open, and they got the shirt where they're going off to school. And one of them's going to play at Gardner Webb, which is where I was. The other four just going off to be students, but like they were good buddies before that, but like they're the ones that on Friday night when they're all hanging out together, they're making fun of me, and I think that's awesome because I was that kid 15 years ago who, went through those mutual experiences, and we made fun of our coaches, and those were the type of guys that I would have hung out with in high school because, I didn't love the weight room. I had to fall in love with it. And, so to get back to your point, we're going to reinforce core values. I think that's the biggest thing you do every day. I'm not talking about, you can have meals, you can have people over at practice. You got to reinforce those core values every day. We praise, this is common sense, but you have to praise things that adhere to what you do and what you believe in, and you have to be confrontational, and you have to attack things that don't. I don't know any other way to say it. So when we get together on a team meeting on Monday, what we're going to get together is I'm going to show you 3 clips that reinforce what we're talking about from discipline, and I'm going to show you 2 or 3 clips that might reinforce, or not reinforce, but attack, you were soft on this play, or we've got 2nd and 2 and you get a toning penalty, which happened to us in a rivalry game this year. Now it's 2nd and 17. I am maniacal about cleaning that bus after a ball game, and I showed them our bus 1 left the bus, not trash, but like it wasn't up to our standard. And I see the bus driver out there sweeping it, and I take a picture of it on Monday. That reinforces, by going back and making them do extra conditioning on Monday, that reinforces the whole belief. And my favorite quote that they always make fun of me of is, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So we're going to try and leave that bus clean. And I've gotten better at making sure that locker room looks like that. And, the field equipment and all that. As you get a little bit better at being a head coach, you kind of understand the day-to-days and the checklist of what you have to do. The second thing I think that I'm really proud of is I think we have a really good ability to hire good men at our place. I've been very lucky because I've got 4 former head coaches on my staff that really see coaching as the same way I do. When they're going to have kids in their homes, they're going to love them. They're going to hug them. I want coaches who are going to be passionate and affectionate about our kids. I think I don't understand why a guy would coach high school football if they really didn't love kids. It's not worth the time commitment. It's not worth the amount of money that they pay you. We've got a bunch of guys who are about it. They don't, some people want to be coaches and some people want to coach. It's one thing to wear the polos, and it's another thing. And dude, I love scheme. I love ball. I love everything about it. But if you're in it because you like to draw up touchdowns, you're probably not going to be real successful. I'm just telling you, because you're dealing with human emotion. You're dealing with, you're dealing with imperfect people. We're imperfect. And, that point when you talk about culture is something that comes directly from my father. Is number 2, if you will, other than reinforcing core values, is keeping the main thing the main thing. And we talk to our kids about that the whole time. Is, it is my job every day to set forth a belief system that we're all doing this for the right reason. Okay. And a byproduct of that is to reach lives, to touch lives, to try and make people better people. All right. And I tell my coaches that all the time. If you're just coming and you're not texting these kids, if you're not trying to pull them aside during the school day, if you're not laughing and joking around with them, and this is just a kind of a transactional relationship where, okay, yeah, I'm going to come and I'm going to do a few drills, and, at 6 o'clock in the day, my day's over. I'm not very good at just leaving the ball field at the ball field. If one of our kids doesn't act becoming of our program, it's going to bother me at home. And I don't necessarily want it to affect my coaches as fathers and husbands, but I want coaches who are going to keep the main thing. And the main thing is seeing kids grow. If I had to point to, one tangible thing that we do every day, and we didn't get through it all, at least in person this year, is our principal's been really good at getting all our kids in the weight room, but we're on what I call pseudo block scheduling. So not only do we get them for an hour and a half, we actually get them in first period for like an hour and 50 minutes. Okay. So what we did last year, on Wednesdays, we would do the leadership class. We would do that. And a lot of times I would bring in we actually went through the book Above the Line by Urban Meyer and talk about what is above the line behavior, what is below the line of behavior, what is blame, complain, and defend. And, I saw Richard Bailey actually was going through that at Scotland this year. And we had a lot of success with that, the daily leadership deal, but some people do the leadership council. I tried to mess with that, but, some of my seniors last year kind of said, Coach, I feel like that's dividing our team a little bit, and that's okay. I think what you have to do, I think in high school football, your team is your seniors in a sense that, it's their last hurrah. And I was so blessed last year that we had 22 kids and all of them managed to contribute in some fashion. Now, 17 or 18 of them played a lot for us. And then I was really intentional about, okay, who are the next guys in line? So if you were a junior who played a lot for us, or in the case we had a sophomore who was one of our better players, making sure they knew kind of where I was at in communicating with those kids daily. But I don't go a week without pulling our seniors aside and talking with them as a group, typically on Tuesday after practice. And then, on that note, in terms of communication, we're very intentional on Mondays at team meetings. I start telling those guys, okay, here's the keys to the game, but here's what core value is going to be the difference in us winning the game. So for instance, if we play a team that I know we're better than, your core value is not, you got to play with the passion and discipline, because you're tougher and you're more together than they are as a byproduct, and you're more talented. Okay. But this week you got to pull yourself up, because it's hard to, I don't have to tell our kids, and we lost to New Hanover twice, but I don't have to tell our kids to play with radical energy in a game when both of them are 8-0 and you're both in the top 10 in the state of North Carolina. Okay. But I tell those guys this week, if we're better than a team, it's going to be about the discipline. It's going to be about the discipline of dialing into your alignment and assignment in practice, so that on Friday night you can really dial into being intentional about passion, and because if you go out there and it's just through the motions, that's when you lay a turd. And that's one thing I've been real proud of with our kids the last 2 years. I don't think we've lost a football game to a team we were better than. The 8 games we've lost in 2 years, we've been probably out-talented a little bit, or not ready to beat a team that was that much older than us. And I think probably of our 15 wins, we've probably won 4 or 5 games where the team might have had a little bit better roster top to bottom than us. At least in certain spots. That's a loaded answer, but that's kind of what we do.
That's awesome, Coach. I've got a page full of notes on that one. I appreciate you going through that. Let me get this phone. So the next one was another loaded question. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you first got started?
Oh gosh, you gave me 30 minutes for this whole thing. That question would have taken about an hour. I mentioned the binder. That's all fine and dandy, in terms of the old coach saying is a lot of that's clinic talk. It has given me something to lean back on in terms of my core values. In fact, it's a non-negotiable for a reason. So like I would hope our culture is identified by those 5 core values that I wrote down in that game plan. But a lot of things in terms of practice schedules, in terms of, managing the staff, in terms of adaptability, that a lot of that goes out the window. And I have such an admiration for like you guys who run the air raid, because you're going to do what you do. And that, that's part of your fabric. I don't like to say that's part of your culture, because I think, and sometimes your scheme is, I get it, but, the one thing I've learned more than anything is you better be adaptable in terms of scheme. Like I mentioned, those 5 kids that took that graduation picture yesterday. I think I did a really poor job of, so anyway, little context. The 5 years before I had got there, our AD was our head football coach for 10 years, but the 5 years between me and him, they had 3 head coaches. There was zero stability. In the 20 years before I had been the head coach, they had 3 or 4 winning seasons. Okay. Now, they had great tradition before that in the 80s and the 90s. So we came in and, we're going to bring it back. Share the same last name as the guy who's won more games there than anybody. That's fine. I think some people just assume that, because of what my last name was or my ties to the quote unquote glory years, that this was just going to happen overnight. And, probably I thought that, he come from college, he's got a great scheme knowledge or whatever it is. And that's so far unimportant in the whole thing. And I think I just came in with that first group of kids. And I told you we were junior led the first year, but I probably did that first year senior class a disservice, because I talked so openly, not just to them, but the rest of the media here around here, that we're not ready to win. The whole culture is broken. And instead of just focusing on keeping the main thing, which is, I've got this team for 1 year, and then I'm going to have the team that follows them for 1 year, and then the team that follows them for 1 year. So I owe this team everything. And, everybody kept pointing, you're gonna be okay the next year, because all these kids who just graduated, they had done good on the JV team. But that, that's not always a correlation on Friday nights. People understand that. It's a whole lot easier for 10th graders to beat up on 9th graders in the JV team than it is for those kids to become 11th graders and beat up on 12th graders. So, I was probably too cognizant and too much telling people, this is going to take a while. This is going to do this. I just wish I would have come in and not mentioned anything about the previous staff. I wish I'd have just came in and said, okay, I'm going to do all I can do for these 10 kids, because this is their last hurrah. And I'm not sure I ever gave that group a reason to totally buy into me. Because I kept talking about the process and the future building as opposed to the right now. There's no time to change lives like the present. So that was my biggest mistake. My second mistake was I probably made a decision on scheme before I took an inventory of what we had player-wise. I think, like even within the air raid, if you will, and I'm not an air raid guy, but even within the air raid, you're going to have certain years where you're better at certain concepts, and you're going to adapt to that based on what your kids can do. The first year we came in and we did this and that and whatever. We weren't good at anything, and I probably should have came and said, okay, this is what we've got at quarterback. This is what we've got at tailback. I'm not a guy who's just tied into one system. So after Florence, we actually switched from a, spread type power spread Auburn sets, where we were going power, counter, buck sweep to more traditional under center, because, our quarterback who's a really, really good high school player, he's going off to Wingate, who's our AD's son. He didn't provide us the misdirection elements that the spread can give you with the quarterback run game, at least at that point, because he had not changed his body. Now, this year, we probably could have done that with him because he had leaned up, he had gotten faster. And I made another mistake going back on scheme is like they had been so bad defensively that I just assumed that if we came in and fixed the defense, the offense would be fine and we'd be okay winning games 24-17. Well, what happened is we ended up losing games 21-7 because we couldn't score. And so we took but having a year of learning your personnel and your team, we really added some of the misdirection elements that you can get with the jet game under center that you see a lot of people do in the gut game or whatever it is, kind of adding a few more wing T principles. We're still not a wing T team. That being said, being here for 2 years, I have an inventory of what we have coming up, and probably I've got 2 seniors who are more runners than what we had. Jay could really throw the football, but these kids are, they're not going to be as accurate, but they're going to be able, they got to carry the football 10 to 12 times a game. So we it does our football team some injustice to go up under center because they provide the misdirection in the offense of pulling it out the back door or whatever. So some of the mistakes were made just from a football standpoint. Staff management, I think you just assume that like you hand somebody a manual and they all do it like this, and that this is how they've all done it. I had to learn how to coach a system. My whole career had been in college football. So, you practice offense for 2 hours a day if you're an offensive coach. I had to learn how to not rob Peter to pay Paul, if you will, and I did that at least going through the first 4 games of my first year you're trying to constantly reinforce culture. Well, you don't realize what you're ingraining is that offense is not important, because, we've been so bad at defense. You gave up 40 points a game before we got here. Well, we lose to Whiteville 14-7. Them offensive guys are looking at you because, you practice defense for an hour and 10 minutes because you're worried to death that JP's going to rush for 400 yards on you at Whiteville or whatever it is. So, you better look yourself in the mirror. And Florence, as bad as it was to our region, it gave me kind of a 4-week chance to kind of refocus and give me an inventory, of, gosh, you're an idiot. So like I said, I can keep going about all the mistakes I made, and eventually, you got to realize you got to take care of yourself. I was doing a poor job of balancing teaching, being a dad, being, like I said, a teacher and, balancing, not exercising, the way you need to do. If there's one thing that anybody listens to me on this is like, you really, really want to be a head coach, talk to anyone who's done it before and just understand, it's no different than a marriage. A marriage is really hard the first couple of years, in my opinion, particularly a coach's marriage. Then it gets into a routine. Now, I think as we've established ourselves, we've got to make sure that routine doesn't become a rut, if that makes sense. So like the first 5 weeks, really the first 7 months of the job was very, very difficult. And, that's as candid as I can be. I told you if I'd have got that job at 26 years old, it would have been a train wreck. This one, the train just kind of got off the rails, but, in some ways, Florence was a blessing because we were able to get it back on the track.
Well, that was awesome. There was one thing when I didn't understand is when you were talking about putting all the attention on defense and not giving any of the offense.
Are you accused of that?
That's the only one I've never had. I've never been accused of that one.
Oh, yeah.
The other ones, I was right there with you. When you were talking, the first point you were making, I'm just reading the second Randy Jackson book, and I liked how he came in and said, the first year is either going to be a revolution or an evolution. that is literally in the hands of the seniors to decide which one. And I
Yeah.
thought that was I've never done it that way, but I thought that was a good way of saying it. It's either revolution or evolution. It's in the seniors' hands to decide that.
Yeah, I think you become a better coach when you become a dad and you start recognizing, like, in the end, did I do justice to that first senior class? Because that is their last hurrah and that's their last experience of it. And I made sure at the banquet that first year that, I want our banquet to be really special, to go around and tell those kids how much I appreciate them. And then at this year's, deal, I was able to really thank those kids for being willing to grow up with me, and I think this year was an evolution of, those kids. I don't care how good you were on a JV team, if they would not have bought into our process, if they would not have bought into the weight room, they would not have been, somebody said, those weren't Brett's guys or whatever the case may be. Those kids would not have won, because there's just such a difference between being that 15 or 16-year-old who's playing that 14-year-old. By the time kids get to be 18, a lot of these guys you're playing against are grown men. Like our second game back from Florence, my first year, we played Hoggard. And, I walked down on the field with my father and he's like, they fill out them pants a little bit better than our boys do right now. And, I made a point to tell those kids, like that part right below you right below your rear end, if it's sagging, you probably ain't going to be very good. And, some people make this a whole lot harder than it is. You got to get good players and you got to get them strong. I mean, that's a strong reality about our sport. And, I didn't do enough, but those kids had to buy into that. And to their credit, and I had to get past the hard line in the sand of saying, you're not a team guy because you're not there yet, because it's one thing to be confrontational. It's another thing to be a jerk. And, I counted those kids, those 5 kids across. I was like, yep, I had this problem with him, had this issue with him, had this issue with him. And all of them came by me yesterday and, wanted to hug me and, thank you for everything. And those ended up being the kids. That whole senior class, if you will, was just so devastated because they had such a unique grasp on the togetherness of what our staff had built. And they were so devastated because, if we could have got past Hanover, we were probably, I don't want to disparage the team that Hanover played the next week, but we were probably going to the Eastern Championship game. And those kids thought they were, by the end of the year, defensively, we gave up 7 points a game. So, they accused me of not wanting to score, so, they really thought, we played state championship level defense. So when the dreams and the goals don't get quote unquote reached, and you see how hard those kids work, that's hard to look in those kids' eyes and realize, and I've thought all off season about, okay, what do we need to do to kind of take that next step? But I'm never going to be able to take that next step with those kids who bought into you. And, that's something we all have to live with, every year, because most good teams don't end the season, winning a game.
Yeah, most of us cry at the end. Only a few of us get to cheer.
No
Last question. What your contact information you want to share, and then anything you want to promote. I know you have a YouTube channel. Anything you want to promote?
Yeah, you guys can. My email is mi, as in Michael. My parents gave that burden on me. I go by my middle name, so it's mi Hickman at bcswan.net, SWAN, like the bird. I'll give out my cell number. My number is 980-295-4704. You can find me on YouTube under Michael Hickman. But if you ever, talking ball, talking culture, whatever, I'm an open book. I don't believe anybody has secrets. I believe that, if there's one thing this time's given us, it's a chance for professional development and see how other people do things, and, nuggets from so many people. I would say this kind of in closing, if your focus is always on schematics and, I have to guard against this because I just love ball. You know, there's so many resources out there to watch film and see what other people are doing. Um, you'll never build what you really think you can build, you know, without really diving into it's not off the field, it's on the field stuff, but it's the fabric of your program, you know. And the other thing I would say is make sure you find a job. Um, you know, it's so hard, and Joe probably laugh at this because he hasn't historically taken over winners. You know, our program was not a recent winner. We did have tradition, but, you know, do your research on the infrastructure of the schools, you know, who the principals are. You know, I had a shirt on this morning that said Trojan Pride. It's in my DNA. You know, I work for a principal who is, you know, she's an alum like myself. And when I asked her, you know, that when they put me through the interview process, they said, what's your vision? And I go through it. We kind of did this whole deal the whole time. And then at the end, I said, let me ask you what your vision is. And she said, I want a crowded stadium on homecoming. You know, I want to turn people away at the gate. And I said, well, she's not a football person by nature, but, you know, I mean, I was like, she's probably smart enough to realize that they ain't showing up if you're 1-8. So she wants to win. And she's been great about, kind of allowing me to educate her on what we need as coaches. I think we have so many administrators right now who don't listen and don't understand our plight. And then I think we have so many football coaches who don't understand what their issues are. You know, in conversations, having tough conversations is a two-way street, and we're not going to get everything that we want. You know, I didn't get to come in and bring 6 guys in my first year, but you know, I knew enough about her and I knew enough about my athletic director, you know, who I mentioned is kind of like a second father to me, that they would sit down, and over time they've made this a really, really good job. And I've been able to bring in 6 guys over the course of 3 years. And, you know, that's really important, infrastructure and what they're going to do for you, how they're going to get kids in the weight room. And then once you get the infrastructure and the pieces in place, once you get the pieces and the infrastructure in place, you know, now you have no excuses. You know, I tell everybody that right now, I have 0 excuses at Westmoreland High School. There's plenty of places that are not like that. Does that mean we're going to win a state championship? I think we're all smart enough to realize that still comes down to talent and playmakers and luck, you know, if you will. You know, we won 10 football games last year, but that had very little to do with coaching. It had everything to do with having a lot of good players and you know, having really good leadership. And, you know, I'm smart enough to realize and humble enough to realize that, you know, it's fun to do the interviews and make it sound like you're smart, but ultimately it's still about getting good players and having good leadership in the school building that allows you to develop this thing we call culture.
Buddy, you absolutely hit a home run. I'm so glad you were the first guy I had on here. I've got pages of notes now, and we're going to be stealing a lot of your great ideas, man. I appreciate you being here, and good luck to you this year. I hope we get out there pretty soon. We were talking before we started videoing, and we were all saying our prayers and crossing our fingers about getting out there, because I think all of us, we've done enough Zooming now. We're ready to get out there and be around the kids again.
I think the one problem for you air raiders is like, well, we don't really know if that was a complete pass when you go out there. So, you know, we're going to do invisible pass scale, and all my DBs are going to get about 8 picks a day now. So we're excited to get back out there even without a football. Yeah, I'm fine. I'd be fine if some of you offensive guys never got to pick up a ball again, or at least, you know, let's keep it from touching too many hands, and let's turn around and hand it off all game.
Well, we saw, you know, when they put the National Federation put the things out, it said 7-on-7 was considered like basketball. So we're like, okay, well, we'll just do 7-on-7 all summer. So
I'm gonna share one last joke, because I know you got the air raid, the as we call it, the cult following. And I love what you guys do, and I'd love to be able to score points. And maybe it's something I need to think about going to. But like Matt Reel, I don't know if a lot of you guys probably know Matt. He's the head coach at North Myrtle Beach, which is a very friendly rivalry across the border down here. And, Matt and I talk quite a bit, to make sure, we're going to be able to play each other this year, given our states might not be on the same rules. And he says, 6-foot splits, social distancing, nobody gets up under center. He said, you'd think COVID-19 was a grand conspiracy between all the air raid guys to make sure nobody got too close to anybody. So I thought that was funny. He's a triple option guy by trade. So, we all got different ways to reach kids. And, I just quick note, I appreciate what everybody here that's listening is doing for young people. That's ultimately why we do what we do.
Thanks so much for being here, man. Again, you hit a home run. That was more than I could have hoped for coming out the gate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. You guys have a good day.